Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Scott-Omenka. I'm the Chief Executive of Carers Trust Solihull, and this is Carers Week. And this is day 3. It's Wednesday, and with me I've got some colleagues from mainly from social services and from education and children's support services and public health in Solihull Council. And I've also got my colleague Powell, who's with us from the Carer Centre. We're going to talk about the impact that this incredible and distressing pandemic has had on carers and what support is available to them and the changes that we see happening as we go forward and try and make sense of them and explain to you where you can go to get advice and support. Just to start off by saying that we have a website, and if you're able to get onto the internet, it's www.solihullcarers.org. That's www.solihullcarers, that's one word, .org. And if you go on that site, there's loads of information there about what we're doing and how you can get support from us. Also, if you can't get on the internet, if you ring 0121 788 1143, you'll be able to speak to a member of our staff team. We're running a reception service, and we'll be able to take you, and if you need extra support or a discussion or any kind of help assistance, we'll be able to allocate you to one of our members of staff. So that's 0121 788 1143. The other thing to say is, as I say, on our site, there's loads of information. We've also very recently, with support from National Carers Trust and with a tremendous amount of support from Solihull Council, we've set up a hardship fund. This is to be used only where we've tried every alternative. But if you've got a problem and you think that you're suffering from particular hardship and you want to contact us and see if we can assist you, or we may know others who can assist you, but if we think you qualify, then we'll be able to support you there. Now, rather than me give you all the lists of the purposes for that, which will take some time, again, if you go on our website and you click on Emergency Fund at the top corner, you'll be able to find out the criteria. But to give you a feel, if there's something you need, if you're caring for someone, for example, and you need to use the laundry and your washing machine's broken down and you can't get one sorted out and you can't leave the house because you're shielding someone who's very vulnerable, you contact us and we'll see what we can do. In those cases, we may be able to make a purchase on your behalf. That's to give you an illustration. But for the full criteria, again, go to our website, www.solihullcarers.org, or give us a call on 0121 788 1143. Now, what I want to start off is, first of all, invite people to introduce themselves and say what their role is in the organisations they work in. So I'm going to go first to Tim, if that's possible.
Thank you. Tim Browne, I'm the Assistant Director for Inclusion and Additional Needs with the Borough Council.
Okay, thank you. And what does that mean, Tim, though? Inclusion and special needs, is that around disability, for example?
Well, I'm still trying to work that out because I'm quite new. I've been here a couple of months. But yes, lots of work around schools, around disabilities, and supporting children and young people who have additional needs of one sort or another.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Denise, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Denise Milnes. I'm Senior Public Health Specialist. My day job is children and young people and commissioning public health services for them, for example, health visiting, school nursing and parenting projects. But currently very much entrenched in infection prevention, health protection, and really just doing everything we possibly can to keep our community safe from COVID.
Thank you very much, Denise. Julia.
Oh, hi, I'm Julia Phillips and I'm the Strategic Commissioner for Older People Services in Solihull. So that means that I've got a remit of looking at any activities, commissioning activities that support our older population. So care homes, care at home, some of the day opportunities programmes. So really anything that provides any help and support to people who are in the older age category and people with dementia. I also co-chair with Leslie the Carers Partnership Board for Solihull.
Yeah, and I just would like to say Julia's done some massive work for us over the last few weeks and has always been very supportive of the carers initiatives and much appreciated for her efforts. Powell, would you like to say something?
Yes, I'm Parol Jilka. I am the Children's Team Manager for Carers Trust in Solihull. I work with my team of support practitioners where we have projects to support our young carers, various activities and engagement from them. Throughout this COVID pandemic, we've been supporting them in their mental health, their inclusion, so their, excuse me, just croaky throat.
Yeah.
So we've just been supporting them in supporting their cared for at home and all the problems that they are facing at present, and trying to recreate our service within the projects, focusing on the needs of our young carers through the pandemic, because they've changed significantly.
Yeah. It's worth perhaps saying that all of us have been grappling with how do you provide services if you can't have direct contact with carers, because many of our staff, that's their massive skill set, that's what they're great at doing. And so we've been doing literally, it must be in the thousands now of telephone calls to the most vulnerable carers. We know exactly where they're at now. We've also cooperated with the Community Wellbeing Service, and there's loads of services there, including Age UK and Renewal Trust, and we've been making referrals back and forth to each other. And so we got a flavour of what's going on, and I think perhaps if we were to start on, if it could be with Tim, some discussion about what's going on perhaps around the school services. And so many of our young carers now, some of them are going up the wall really, and we've been able to contact them through Zoom, which is some work that Powell's been doing recently and trying to build up groups and networks. But it's a very challenging time for them. Would you like to share what's happening, Tim?
Certainly I will. Yeah, you're right. It's incredibly challenging, and what we've been trying to do is everything we can to support young carers and those children and people who are more vulnerable because they have additional needs or they've got healthcare needs and so on. So it is trying to look at different ways to interact. Some of the things that really have been on my mind and I've been worried about is how we can make sure that children and young people are still able to get out and to have some sort of social interaction, because that's one of the main problems that I think we're going to face going forward. And the other one of my other preoccupations, things I'm worried about, is what happens in September and beyond, because what we do know is that the progress that children make will be impacted quite significantly during this, as a result of this period. So we're starting to think about how we could support children and young people with their learning, to get them re-engaged, to start picking up on some of the lost ground that will have occurred during this time, and what sort of summer offer there might be for children and young people. But I think probably one of the big issues we're going to face is about how do we get all children and young people back to school in September, given the current social distancing arrangements. And Denise and I have been talking about that quite a lot just recently, and what that looks like on the ground. But so there's some of the sort of gritty questions that I'm trying to work through. In terms of support, there's a huge offer out there. In the same way that, Brandon, that you're ringing young carers, we're also doing that with children with education, health and care plans, for example. Our education psychologists are laying on sessions for families to talk through issues and concerns they may have, and a whole raft of other arrangements. But I think there's some of the key things from where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that what we're finding is there's children who are isolated, there's children who are struggling with schoolwork, other children who are caring and worrying about their exams. They haven't been to school now at key points in their education, and being there, available to them. Powell's team have rung up over 200 of the most COVID terms vulnerable children and made contact with them. We started putting together schemes and courses and activity, and also purchasing things. I mean, if you're buying something for a young carer, it's quite different from an adult carer. It might be something that they can play with. Play is very, very important in terms of well-being. It might be papers and pencils to do homework and stuff like that. So as long as we've also had some contact with your colleague Julie Hackett, and where we get an opportunity to contact people and to see any synergies, we welcome that. So again, if we see if you can keep us informed of how the relaxations take place, we can be as up to date as possible for Solihull. I would say that I remember at the start of this process, it was like it was breakneck speed with which things changed. Suddenly, one week it would be completely different from the previous week. And I'm wondering, as we come out, eventually something similar will happen. As evidence is coming back that things are either safe or not safe, things may move much quicker. But thanks for that, Tim. Denise, would you like to bring us up to speed with where we are with public health?
Yeah, as excuse me, as you alluded to earlier, Brandon, we're very much in a situation where the lockdown is now easing, and the next milestone really in that process is this coming Monday. And from this coming Monday, there's a situation where there's an expectation for people to use face coverings on public transport. We've got more of our shops opening, so the non-essential shops are beginning to have their plans to open up. And also we've got a change from this coming Monday in Solihull, in that the number of mourners to attend cremations and burials is going up. So I can say that from Monday, 14 people will be enabled to attend cremations and 20 people to attend burials, which I think is really good news for families, because I know it's been incredibly difficult for people who are trying to have a funeral and some closure, and only 10 people can actually attend. So that's really good news for families. And what we'd say really from the public health side, in this position where we've got this easing of the lockdown, that the messages that we've had throughout this pandemic are more important than ever. So to really emphasise to our communities that keeping 2 metres minimum distance from any other individual is absolutely key. And please do keep pushing those messages out that social distancing is really the way to be really tackling this pandemic, along with good hand hygiene. And we can't say that often enough. I know we've been a bit of a stuck record on that, but that is the way we are going to actually tackle this effectively, and that's much more important as we come out of the lockdown than it has been whilst we've been in it. So really crucial that those are our messages to our communities. And we actually accept that it's been a really tough time for carers during this pandemic. And what we have seen is and heard of is that carers are requiring more support and probably really feeling the effects on their mental well-being of this time. And I think it's really important, and to echo Tim's point about the support services that are available. For example, there are mental health helplines. There's one for adults. There was one for key workers. And also there's things in place for our children and young people. For example, the school nurse service have got a text messaging service. They get response within a working day. There's lots of routes for support. There's online counselling through Cooth for our 11 to 25-year-olds. So there's a lot of support for our carers, but we do accept this has been a significantly difficult time for them. And we know it's been a real challenge, and really just acknowledge their efforts in keeping going with that.
Yes, I'll just emphasise again, if people go on our website at www.solihullcarers.org, that's www.solihullcarers.org, there's a list of what all the different agencies in the borough can do, other voluntary projects, what we can expect from social services. There's a whole COVID package of information there. And you can also find information about supermarkets, because one of the things we did right at the very beginning of this process was we rang up the supermarkets and asked them if they would acknowledge and give preferential access to carers with our carers card. So they knew these people were caring someone at home. It's very difficult to get out to shop sometimes when you've got no respite care, you've got no daycare. So you're slipping out, you're trying to get stuff and get back quickly, and people getting stuck in queues. And I think I can safely say that all the supermarkets responded in some way or another. Some giving special access to particular times, others other ways of responding. So if you want to find out what supermarkets in Solihull are, what arrangements they have for shopping, you can go again on our website, and there's a list of all the supermarkets there and what the arrangements are. And today we're refreshing it for Carers Week. So we're going back to the supermarkets, and we'll start contacting them and saying what's happened, what's changed over the last few weeks. Do they want to amend their advice to the public, and what support they can offer. I think the other thing coming out of the public health observations then is fear. Let's be clear about this. Many of our carers are doing fantastic. They're doing a great job. They're coping well. But I don't think anyone thought it was necessarily going to last this long. Now people are talking about to the end of the year. And with some of our carers, they are either caring for someone who's extremely vulnerable, And for those who don't understand, the extremely vulnerable tends to refer to people with some form of compromised immune system, either because they've been treated for cancer, for example, or they may have had an organ transplant, or they may have some underlying condition that affects their immune situation, makes them very vulnerable to infection. And a number of our carers are in that group, or in the high risk group as well, or caring for someone in the high risk groups, and people with all a range of health problems that could make them again more susceptible. I think we've heard about obesity, for example, being one of those concerns, diabetes as well. There's again a list of that information that is available, and we've written out to our carers twice, over 3,000 of them. 3,700 in fact, to tell them what we can offer and what the issues are they need to be prepared for, and that basic public health advice. But that fear and isolation is, I think, perhaps something we could have a discussion about, because I believe, from what the feedback I'm getting from the staff, that a lot of our adult carers in particular don't want to leave the house at the moment because they've been told all this information about risk and threat, and they will be very anxious about going out, even with the proper guidance that you're referring to. What would you say to them? Who would like to comment on that?
I can come in again, Brand, if that's
thank you, Denise. Yeah, great.
Yeah, just to say on that point, I mean, we seem to have seen throughout the last, I think, say month or so during this situation, we've seen almost two camps of people. So we've got the camp of people that are kind of quite blasé and are kind of going out and mixing and don't really grasp the importance of the social distancing. And there's another camp of people that are terrified to go out their front door, quite understandably. There's an awful lot of fear and anxiety out there, and we know that you know, that's having a huge impact on people. And what we'd really reiterate to carers is just to really follow the guidance at gov.uk for them specifically, and to just to say that you know, obviously our number is it's under monitoring, but has been falling for us to be enabling the lockdown to be easing, but just to, if they take those measures that have been outlined, then to get out when they can, because it's good for their well-being, good for their own sense of just sort of a release and a rejuvenation. It's a really tricky time, but I think the guidance for carers is still as critical as ever, is that they only give the essential care as they would be, wash their hands when they arrive at the home of the person they care for, and you know, if they cough or sneeze, cover their mouth and nose with a tissue. All these issues, if they're symptomatic, if they're looking and caring for somebody who is either vulnerable or clinically vulnerable, to make different arrangements for those people and to have that emergency plan for them. To have all that in place might actually ease some of their anxiety about the actual caring role, but it's a really difficult message in which to ease their anxiety over the going out message. And I think I would say there is, if they are taking the appropriate precautions and they are enabling social distancing, using the hand hygiene, but also, you know, if they feel happier to wear a face covering, for example, that will provide some, only minimal, but some protection for people around them from if they're symptomatic. But it's to say that it is in their benefit to get out in some way, shape or form.
Thank you, Denise. That's really helpful. Before I come to Julia, I just thought I'd just bring Pavel back in just on some of the Zoom activities we've been doing with young carers, so they can actually talk to their peers and talk to staff. Do you want to mention a bit about that, Pavel?
Yeah. So what we felt was important, we first gave our young carers a little bit of time to get used to the lockdown period, and then we slowly started engaging them into our services, trying to resume the new normal services via Zoom. We found that a lot of them have really benefited from them. It's helping their social skills, and from the time that we've started to where we are now, they are a lot more confident on Zoom. They're getting their siblings involved, they're getting their parents involved in the activities that we're doing, and it's really promoting positive relationships. And going forward now, our next steps is to start Zoom support work in readiness and preparation for school. Because again, going back to what you've said on their fear, there is so much fear, and unfortunately our young carers have not just got themselves to think about in this transition, they've also got their cared for. We've got many that have got siblings on the spectrum who they have to deal with the outburst and the change for their cared for as well as themselves.
Yeah.
So it is so important just to keep engaging with them, liaising with them, talking to them, offering that support. But we would also like to see where we can access help to support our young carers going back into education.
Yeah. Thank you, Pat. That's really helpful. Julia, if we could come on to you now, and we have a little bit of a look at some questions in a moment, but I found really helpful during this period our phone conversations. Julia does a lot of the commission activity and oversees some of the caring activity, and just being kept up to speed with what was going on in some of the services that normally carers would be accessing, so like daycare and respite care, and indeed in some cases residential care as well, because we've done what we devised a tool. The head of our adult services, Hazel, who's not with us today, but she did a tool with Pamela called the COVID-19 assessment. We worked out exactly what information we needed to be giving to carers, and we stopped doing our normal work and focused on that, and we've done hundreds of those, and really made sure the carers knew what they were entitled to. But I think there is now getting to that point where sometimes carers are being expected to go back to work, for example, and they can't access some of the services. So could you just tell us what's been going on there? Because I know there's been some really good news around care homes of late as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously to pick up on what Denise has already said, you know, understandably, a lot of carers have been incredibly wary. You know, the news hasn't helped, you know, calm anxieties to a degree, because, you know, there have been some homes that have been significantly affected by COVID. There have been services where a lot of their staff have been affected. Some services, you know, particularly say care at home, you know, 30-40% of their staff at any one time might have been off, which obviously has then an impact on what those services can actually deliver by way of support. Some carers, you know, obviously and very understandably have kind of felt that they would rather reduce the risk of people coming into their home, and they would rather provide that care themselves during this period, which means that that's an added difficulty for those carers. And you know, as Denise has said, you know, amazing the way that the carers have supported during this period, and you know, and real hats off to them for everything that they're doing, and how they've worked with us to kind of support those people that are most vulnerable and need support. The difficulty was that obviously things like daycare, how do you deliver safe daycare, you know, with social distancing? So what a lot of the day services tried to do was to start to look at how they could still have some contact, how they could still maybe support people, maybe doing some lunch calls or whatever. So staff actually going in and working with those people directly, rather than people coming into a day service. Obviously, for those people, it was good to have that support, but equally, it's not the full day that a carer would normally have their relative out of the house for, and you know, not the same experience for the person receiving what would have been their daycare. You know, it's a very different approach, but again, you know, it's been trying to find the best way of continuing to provide that support in these circumstances to mitigate and reduce any risk of infection to both the person, their families, and also to the staff that are delivering that support. We're now starting to look at, you know, some of the providers are starting to look at how they could start to open up some of the services, maybe for those that are more vulnerable and more in need of support. You know, is the ways that they could do that in a more safe way, and how would they do that, and how would that work? So I think over the next couple of weeks, we might start to have information coming through that will provide a little bit more detail and opportunities for people to start maybe picking up some of that additional service provision. For others, it might still be, you know, that actually instead of coming into a centre based, it might be, you know, more about meeting in the community, and especially if the weather starts to get nice again, you know, what can you do actually outside, and what sort of activities can you deliver, and by way of support. So that's something that we're hoping will come into being quite soon. In terms of care at home, anybody now coming out of hospital, regardless of whether going into care homes or back home with care at home support, is actually now being tested. So people will know and have a result prior to actually being discharged from hospital. So again, that's helped services to understand whether this is somebody that they might then need to be, managing in a different way, what equipment the staff will need to ensure that they are delivering care really, really safely, so that they can mitigate any risk to both the carer and the member of staff. So yeah, it's been a very interesting period. It's trying to provide as much support as possible, try to provide as much reassurance as possible, but at the same time, trying to sort of manage some of the impacts that have been quite hard for some of our providers, and some of our homes have really, really been badly affected. Others have not necessarily been touched, and there's no rationale for that. And obviously part of the problem is that quite a lot of the people that are positive have got no symptoms. So how do you know if somebody's coming? So all of those checks and balances. So a lot of the homes, there's lots of thermometer, temperature testing for the staff, the residents, for anybody coming into the home. Some providers have even got like those airport scanners, the heat scanners as people are coming in. So people are trying to do everything they can to provide that assurance. And I have to say, one of the good things that has come out of this is just how services have really started to work much more closely together. Some of the stories that I'm hearing from some of our care homes and some of our providers about the lengths that the staff have gone to. I mean, some staff have actually slept and stayed in care homes, have literally not moved out of the care homes for 28 days to sort of have that lockdown to keep the people in those homes as safe as they possibly can be. So things like that have been really, really amazing. Not just our carers, but also the care support staff that are actually delivering many of the services. So, big thanks to all of those for everything that they've done during this time. It's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, if I could just say on that, throughout the process, when we were ringing around the carers that we had who were in the most at-risk group, we started with them. There was over 550 we had to ring. Mm-hmm. And when I say we, that the team has just been outstanding. And we've had some of our volunteers have not been able to work with us because they can't come into the office. But others who've worked from home have done invaluable service as well. And it's really, really helped us. And the stories of resilience, of devotion from carers to their cared for, of going, all the so-called extra mile. And the ones that we found that were struggling, it was about 10%. And it was mainly emotional frailty. They basically, at their wits' end, they tried everything and they didn't. And then we ring them up. And within a matter of a few minutes, we can identify what the problem is, come up with a simple solution, and put them at the reason, and we'll ring them back. So we have I think we're calling them amber carers, that we ring back if there's a problem. And there's been a very small number of what we call red carers, where we've got to do something right there and then. And we found, particularly at the beginning, the work of Age UK with the older food banks and support, and the work of Renewal Trust with the under sixes. I think they were carrying. I've probably got the age wrong there, but the not older carers with the food bank. Now, of course, as we all know, they're combined, or all the resources have now gone to Renewal to run the whole thing together. But they've been outstanding. And the links we've had with Alison McCrory, who's the Assistant Director of Communities in the council, and I was on all those conference calls, and sometimes my colleague Paul or Hazel would join those calls. And it's at the beginning, it was really heartening to hear what all the voluntary sector groups were doing. On the negative side, I think it's the smaller voluntary organisations who rely on day-to-day fundraising and fundraising activities. A lot of them have had to go into mothballs because they haven't got any resource, or it's not safe for them to do their work. And that points to what's going to happen as the restrictions are lifted, because how do you run a community centre with social distancing and all these other issues when you've got some of your staff who are in the high-risk groups, as well as we do in our staff team? And I think the other elephant in the room will be the economy. I think that there'll be a lot of our carers who won't have work to go back to. I think that we're going to have some real challenges going forward as a country. And there was a certain point, I think, nationally, when you could put the television on and you heard everybody pulling in the same direction. And then it doesn't matter what stations I'm from. There was a point where everybody just was focusing on what wasn't right, what wasn't possible. And I found that quite disheartening. I think some of our carers did as well. There's a time to review what was got right and not. And I think it's a bit later in the day, really, when we've got more evidence. Is it possible we could have a look at those 4 questions that carers have sent in, Julia? I assume the answer might be the same for all of them, but if I just read one of them out and you give me your views on it. Some of the carers are asking whether they could use their direct payments resources for other support needs because they no longer can have a personal assistant come. I'd assume the answer, actually I won't assume the answer, I'll let you answer that one.
So yeah, I mean, direct payments can be used to meet any identified eligible need. However, what it's used for needs to be recorded on their care plan. So there needs to be a record of how that support is going to deliver to the needs that have been identified for that individual. So the best response is, if in doubt, well, in fact, I'd say contact One Front Door. The number is 0121 704 8007. To ask that question. So, you know, the One Front Door will be able to provide any advice or support to help people think about how they can actually get any support if it's not able to be delivered via a personal assistant or through the normal means. And that kind of comes down into some of the other questions around things like day services and respite. You know, if there's any doubt about what services are available and how to access those, again, One Front Door will be able to support. Picking up on what I said just around the testing, I mean, it's fantastic that our community nursing teams will now provide swabbing for people in the community going into something like respite or into long-term care. So again, actually, that shouldn't be a barrier for any person able to access respite care that they might need. Providers will know what the status is of that individual in terms of whether they're COVID positive or negative. And can, you know, and so that should make it easier for carers to be able to get access to the services and support that the cared for needs.
Thank you very much. I'm going to the second question, which is a similar kind of area. And it's like this: my cared for has a service such as daycare before COVID-19. They were using that service, which allowed me to work. My employer is now insisting I return to work. What services can the council provide so I can stop caring for the person that I currently care for? I assume this person would be popping in the evenings or in the mornings, then going off to work, and now can't do that. What's the answer there, do you think?
So again, that is a discussion with One Front Door, because there are still, you know, for example, care at home services are still in place. I mean, there was a period where we had to obviously go through that period of easement, because obviously there was such high sickness levels and self-isolation requirements within the care at home workers. But those services are now coming back, resuming sort of normal capacity levels, so are able to pick up a lot more of the packages now than they could, you know, this time last month. So, you know, there's respite services still available. There are providers that are still delivering respite. So again, you know, One Front Door can help with the access to that if that's required. What care at home provision, even in some circumstances, maybe through some of the volunteering activities that you know, have been identified. You know, in terms of if there are people that are able to provide some element of support to people through that voluntary network rather than through formal statutory provision. So again, it's worth just having that discussion with One Front Door. If anybody is worried about how.
Want to get that phone number again, Julia?
Yes, it's 0121 704 8007.
And I should say as well to any carers out there who are watching this film and I'm not quite sure about anything we're describing. Again, you can ring us on 0121 788 1143. And there's loads of information that we keep referring to on our website, which is on www.solihullcarers.org. I am aware that for some carers, particularly those who are either new to caring or new to these services, because there's many carers out there aren't even aware that they're carers. They just think they're just doing what they should be doing, support their family members, and that's absolutely right. But if you find you are caring for someone where it's taken up a large proportion of your time. You're having to juggle other things around it. Maybe you have to give up work sometimes to provide care, or you're caring for, say, your own children and for an elderly relative. That's what we mean when we use the term carer. Talking about someone who is providing hours of care, and in some cases, if they weren't caring, the person would have to come into an institution or go into a hospital ward, because they're so intensive and so focused in the work that they're doing. So if you're in that group, or if you're on the fringes of that group, you can contact us give the number again, 0121 788 1143. Another case that came up for, I think again it'd be for Julia, and while I'm doing this one, Paul, you might want to think about if there's any questions you have for Tim, because having him available there may be something you might want to do when I get round to that, because he's sitting there waiting patiently, but I'm sure there's loads of things that we want to do, how we could coordinate better. But to finish off these adult questions, if you like, next one is, I'm a sole carer for my elderly mother with dementia. Who will care for her if I become unwell? Did you have a go at that, Julia?
I can, yes. So, I mean, as you're aware, Brandon, we've been doing a lot of work with the Carers Trust to look at contingency plans, so how we can start to work with carers to really understand what they can do in an emergency situation. So we know those that have a support network to call upon, and those that don't and would need, obviously, us to be identifying a solution and supporting them to find that solution. Obviously, there's always, even if you've got a support network, there will always be occasions when there might be an emergency that is going to require a response before your contingency plans can kind of kick into action. So again, you know, one front door is the key point of call for any of those discussions. If in doubt, one front door will be able to talk things through with carers. We have still, as I said, we've still got a lot of services that are operating and available that would be able to step up. You know, there are providers that will deliver night sitting services, overnight support care for a short time during an emergency. There's respite provision that could support in an emergency situation. And there's also the usual care at home type services that can actually support as well. So there's still that support available to people. But I think the key thing is to really get people to start to think about their contingency plans and to really know what they need to do if any of those circumstances arise. But there's, as I say, one front door, which is 0121 704 8007. We'll be able to help advise any carers that are worried about those sorts of situations. Yes,
as you know, we can assist carers and enable them to write a contingency plan. We call it a plan for the future, and at times it can be a bit daunting. A lot of carers don't like to ask their relatives or their friends or their neighbours for help. It's not just about pride, it's also about privacy and not wanting to expose their cared for. Sometimes cared for people don't like everybody knowing their business. It's quite understandable. And then you get into a spiral where you actually burn yourself out, drain yourself. And quite a lot of the time when we're working with carers, it's giving them permission to say, you know what, I need some help. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. So if there's any carers out there who are watching this and thinking, I could do with some help, give us a call and we can assist you with that. And sometimes just knowing what the options are ahead can take a great weight off people's shoulders. A lot of carers worry about the future for their cared for, particularly if they're very frail themselves. And we do have carers who would probably qualify to be in the at-risk group. And in fact, they definitely are in the at-risk group. Some of them are in the extremely vulnerable group, caring for someone else. So it's quite a challenging experience. But it's about helping people. In normal run of affairs, we do training courses and workshops on contingency plans. We will hopefully get some of those things back up and running as we go forward. But our COVID plan is effectively it's a contingency plan in embryo anyway. What to do to cope during the crisis. So again, if anybody wants to come to us, our adults team, or for that matter, our young carers team, we'll be able to help them. I've got
Brandon,
one last question. Sorry, go ahead. Can I just say as well, because I mean, one of the key triggers often for an emergency respite situation is often the health of the carer. Yeah.
and the importance of the carer to actually support their own health and their own health needs. We know that during this COVID phase, a lot of people have not been going forward and, accessing the health and support services that they would previously have probably accessed prior to COVID, because of people being concerned and fearful about going into a hospital environment during this stage. So again, it's really, really important for carers to be looking at how they can have their own health needs met. You know that as part of the work that we've been doing on the carers strategy, we've worked with UHB to sort of look at how we can kind of have flags on the system so that any carers that have had to make special arrangements for their cared for when they're having their own health needs met should be seen as a priority, and their operation should not be cancelled unless there is an absolute need, because it's the needs of, it's medically advocated for the carer rather than just because of system issues or pressures. Now, we can't always say that that's not going to happen, but that should be really the default position, that we don't want carers who have had to put together significant support plans for the person they're caring for to have their health needs and their operations cancelled because of the impact that will then have them trying to then rearrange all of that stuff. So, a lot of what we've been doing with UHB, University Hospitals Birmingham, has been around some of those barriers that have really prevented carers being able to access the support that they need for their own health and wellbeing needs. And so hopefully that will be addressed going forward over the years as part of the strategy and the action plan that we've developed as the Carers Partnership.
And of course, what we can do is liaise with yourself and give feedback from our carers as it comes up. You mentioned easement earlier. For those who are not aware, that was when the councils all over the country were given the option of actually focusing their support in the acute and difficult areas that they were facing, where people were in absolute crisis. At the time, I think it was 20-25% staff vacancy, because people were either shielding or they were at home coping with the illness, or looking after others who were, or self-isolating. And it was a pretty challenging period, I think. And what my understanding I had with yourself, and also I think I had an exchange with Jenny Wood, who's the executive director for the adult social care services, was if we saw someone who had a service temporarily stopped that was in crisis, we would notify you. And I think in those days, if there'd been a problem that was causing real crisis, that you would have addressed it promptly, because you didn't want things to start to all tip over.
Absolutely.
The only question I had left, and I can open it up actually, is this issue about burnout. As I said, when we started doing our calls, I don't know how long it's been now, Pavel, but I think we were probably been doing it for 8 weeks now, I should think. And we're just about easing off direct calls now and focusing a bit more on calls coming in, because we get on average around anywhere between 50 and 100 calls coming in a week. And some of them are quite complex, or the person's in a very difficult situation. But we are seeing more anxiety, exhaustion. It's a very demanding process. At the beginning, people, as I said, it was very impressive how resilient people were. But I think that will take its toll. And I think we need to be thinking about our services there. We have agreed with the council that some of the hardship could be diverted towards either a bit of telephone counselling and support. And over time, we may even try and develop some kind of groups and drop-ins. We had a Zoom relaxation course. It sounds a little bit West Coast, but our relaxation courses are really good. My colleague Michelle organises them. And a lot of carers go on that course, and when they come off it, they just sing its praises, because it gives them permission and some techniques sometimes how to relax, because it's a very relentless thing, even in the ordinary run of affairs. Take COVID out of the equation. So if anyone wants to come in on these issues of anxiety and exhaustion, even physical health, by that I mean exercise. I've noticed that since this has started, I'm not doing as much exercise. I'm stiffer. I've got achy joints when I'm sat on the computer all day. But if anyone wants to comment on that, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I can come in on that, Brandon, if that's okay. Yeah. Just to say, I mean, we'd say to carers as much as possible for them to actually prioritise their self-care. And I talk to particularly parents of children with additional needs and people caring for people with significant need. that you're only as strong as the way you're looking after yourself to be able to look after your cared for, and it's really important that they build in that self-care and that time. And our messages really to carers would be, yeah, get out into the fresh air, try and do some daily exercise, do something you enjoy, and actually just find something where it's downtime, that it's just them, it's protected time. And I think your point is really crucial about the relaxation course, is giving them permission to do this. This is hugely important, that they're looking after themselves. And when we do our work with parents, it's always the first session is around, what do you do to look after yourself? How do you become, you know, a self-cared for parent? Yeah, we'd sort of suggesting that, I'm sure you've had these discussions with carers, is to actually make as much contact as they can with people, with friends and family, keep that as a regular way of building into their regular routine, as somewhere they can just be themselves for a while, and just find that time to do some enjoyable activity that is about recharging their batteries, whether it's taking a hot bath, you know, watching Netflix, whatever it is that makes them feel ready and recharged for the next phase of their caring. Crucially important.
Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, and I think Denise makes really good points, actually. I mean, one of the things which I find is that I have an autistic son, and actually it's really, really hard work, and you've got to give yourself permission to escape. And going for those walks and having that time on my own, I find really important. And without that, actually, I wouldn't be in the right frame of mind either to do my work or to look after my son. So I can't stress the importance of what Denise is saying enough.
Yeah. Powell.
Just coming back on that, we've also been trying to promote outdoor physical health. So we managed to get a little bit of fundraising to create a pot from Balsall Lions, and what they did was they gave us a small amount of money to be able to help young carers do with the resources of things that they can do with physical activities. So we've been able to provide our young carers with outdoor equipment rather than sitting at home, sitting inside on the sofa. You know, we don't want to promote all the Netflix. It's nice to have a bit of time out, but it's not something that we would say do all day, every day, you know. So we've been trying to focus our fundraising funds on things that our young carers can do to enable them to get some fresh air, to get their bodies and joints and everything moving and keeping them active, and also getting them tired before bedtime.
Yes,
Absolutely.
bedtimes have been a little bit flexible in my household. Sometimes my daughter has been getting up at lunchtime. We've had to sort of address that with her at certain points, because then she wants to play all night long. I think that the other thing here has been the support of the community. We managed to, one of our volunteers, Peter, managed to get some funding from, as Paul was mentioned, from the Lions, but we also got some funding from Tesco's. Every little bit matters, and we'd like to thank our funders when they step up, when they make donations to us, because that enables us to do things a bit different and to meet those needs which sometimes would be more costly to do. I think the other thing is organisations. We should bear in mind that there's a lot of volunteering going on at the moment. A large number of people who couldn't work for one reason or another have volunteered. We've taken on 6 new telephone befrienders, which takes a bit of pressure off the frontline staff once they've sorted out the presenting problem. That a befriender can then form a relationship through the telephone or through Zoom, and we obviously vet them and police check them and all the rest of it. But that gives us a bit more capacity then to just be there for people, because sometimes a conversation is all that's required. Just to know that someone's there if you need to talk to someone, it makes a huge difference. Paul, were there any questions you had for Tim?
Yes, please. So from our COVID-19 check-ins and assessments, what we're getting back is quite a lot of our young carers do not feel supported academically. In terms of that, on our website, what we have done is we've put activities, educational links, books, online books. Is there anything more we could do to support our young carers academically?
You raise really good points, and I think that the issue that the government and councils up and down the country are trying to grapple with is how do you educate at home and virtually and remotely, and it's really difficult. What we've been doing is working with our schools to increase the number of children, young carers who can get back to school as quickly as possible. So that's the first thing we've been doing. So they've opened up to reception, year 1 and year 6. And just this morning we were talking about how we can open up schools more widely as well,
Right.
for more young people, and what that looks like. But I suppose if you look at the secondary side, it's a little bit different. So I was talking about primary first, but secondary, the current guidelines suggest that schools should invite years 10 and 12 back for a very limited amount of teacher contact. So what I think probably I would encourage everyone to do is to make contact with their own individual school, and if they're needing more work, or it's not quite the right level, or they're having problems with it, do make sure that link's happening, those conversations are happening, and actually arrange for some tutor time with their tutor going to school. And I think, as Denise raised, getting out is really important. And we've had to encourage our own children to get out a bit more, because it's very easy to stay in. But a day in school or half a day in school, getting into that learning environment again is really, really important.
Absolutely.
And I think the other bit that's been raised already by Brandon is trying to get back into some sort of normal routine, bedtime routines and waking up routines, because it really impacts your mental health in quite a difficult way. And as we start trying to loosen up the lockdown, we need to make sure that we're ready to learn again. And I would really encourage some of your young carers to start thinking about that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. One thing I found as well is projects, doing things with, in my case, with my daughter, that we've always said we were going to do. Well, now we've got time to do it, and actually involving her. We moved bedrooms, which is a big undertaking, and now she's got loads of things just the way she wants them. And it's nice when your family, you got the time, you can make the time, because I'm also a carer. My wife cares for my mother-in-law here, and we need a routine as well, so that it makes all the difference, particularly when you're working as well. And I really feel for those carers that are isolated and haven't got an immediate network. In some cases, they're living in a community in which they don't know their neighbours, or there's some reason why they can't turn to them. And again, in those circumstances, if they can contact us, we can be there to support them. I'm thinking we covered quite a lot of the ground I wanted us to cover today. So I think one thing we might want to consider concluding with is going round now, and any last messages or information you think carers might benefit from and you want to share with them. And what we'll do as well is we may be able to get some of the answers you're giving onto sort of like frequently asked questions site, because some of the things you've commented on, I think, would be issues that all carers would benefit from, but not all will watch this recording. So who would like to go first?
Brandon, I'd just like to say, I mean, obviously you'll have had quite a lot of learning coming back from carers in terms of comments that they've made, things that they've found difficult, or things that have actually worked really, really well. So that learning is really, really vital to help us, because, touch wood, it won't happen. But if we were to go into a second phase of COVID, second spike, actually, what could we do differently next time that hindsight tells us would have been good to have done the first time around? So,
if I could
information like that is really important.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I saw was when we moved from shielding, carers got their guidance out, which is on the government website, which is really helpful. And people knew that if they got the condition, then they should stay at home for a number of days, contact NHS, is it 111, and keep them informed. And if the breathless has started, then report, to the services, and maybe go to hospital if required. That was very clear. And then when it moved to stay at home, I'm not sure everybody understood what was going on. That actually they could go and shop again. They couldn't just rely on their family to do it, because they were in a similar predicament. And I think that whenever we go through these stages where we're changing things, the explanation has to be really clear, and it needs to be communicated probably directly to carers. We can do a certain amount of email. We've done 2 major mail shots to tell people what we think is going on at this stage, and we delayed till the relaxation came into place before we did the second mail shot. It's more of a postcard with some basic information and where to come to, but we can update our website quite regularly, because what I think one of the problems were in our media wasn't providing a clear message. They were themselves saying, what does this mean? And I don't know about you, but I used to shout at the television, it means this, silly, because I'd read the guidance and I knew what it meant, and I knew my staff team were reading guidance and really trying to get it absolutely clear for people. So any transition stage, when it looks like, why am I able to do this? I'm not able to do that. Sometimes explaining why. There's a particular reason why this has been relaxed and that hasn't. Those things are really valuable, I think, because it keeps people's confidence. They understand what's going on. Denise, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to. That was one of the points I was going to raise, actually, Brandon, about the final messages, really. For carers to really go to trustworthy sources on there for their information. And I think it's absolutely key what you've just said around that, because what a lot of the anxiety we're coming up against across our communities is when things have been either misunderstood or misinterpreted, or actually miscommunicated in the first place, and created no end of fear and anxiety that actually should not have been there, and that's been really difficult to deal with. So absolute emphasis on trustworthy information, and the government have got WhatsApp messaging if that works for people, or to check gov.uk. Just keep an eye on the changing situation. Go into those trustworthy sites for information. I think that's a real kind of take-home message that I'd like carers to really hear. And the other one, just to emphasise, just to look after themselves, really do look after themselves, and like echo what Julia and Brandon and people have been saying about, it's been an immense effort, really has, from our carers, and I think we're hugely grateful to them, and it's a case of just make sure that they're looking after themselves, they're staying upright, and they're managing to recharge their batteries, and just to really do everything they can to make sure that they are taking care of themselves, as well as they're cared for. So that's it from me.
Thanks a lot, Denise. Tim?
Yeah, just a similar message, really. Just say how absolutely impressed we all are about how carers have managed, and we know it's really, really tough. But I just want to say that you're not alone. Do reach out to other people if you need to, and we're getting through this, and we will get through the other side. But don't do it on your own. If you need help and support, then do reach out to us.
Thank you again, Pavel.
Well, all I can say is carers, they're more isolated than before, more than ever. They lived in an isolated position before the lockdown, and now they've just got no means of engagement, interaction with friends, and where their main sources of interaction was school. So I just think we all need to really come together to ensure that they get the help and support that they deserve and they need to be able to get back into schools safely, and keeping them as a priority and letting them know that they're a priority. They should be a priority, getting them back into school and having the new normal support available to them firsthand.
Thank you. Before we conclude, just to give some basic pieces of information out again. We're Carers Trust Solihull, or I am, and Paul is, working with our colleagues here with Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council. If you are a carer and you need any support, and a carer is someone who's caring for a member of family, it could even be a neighbour, it could be a friend you're making shopping for, or you provide cooking food for, you're just helping that elderly person that is struggling, or you're just looking in on a neighbour. But if you find yourself you're doing that for any length of time, where you're having to juggle other responsibilities, etc., or if you are the spouse who's actually caring for someone with a serious medical condition, these are the sort of people we're talking about. And if you're in doubt, ring us anyway. We can still provide you with support and advice and information. One of the things we used to do, which we're not able to do at the moment, is we used to do a kind of like a reception service in some of the GP surgeries in the borough. And people would come and stop and talk to our staff or our volunteers, and they'd realise that actually either one, they were a carer themselves, or that someone in their family was a carer. and we give them information that they pass on to other people. So it's just about raising people's awareness that you have information, resource and support you can access. Now, our website, again, for the last time, is www.solihullcarers.org. You can go on that website and just access loads of information. If you find it a bit daunting or you can't get onto the website, ring us on 0121 788 1143. That's 0121 788 1143. Now, if you are aware of our services, you will know that we have offices at the fire station annex in Solihull, but those offices are closed at the moment because of the restrictions. It's not viable yet for us to reopen them. We'll reopen them as soon as possible. And we aren't doing home visits for the same reason, but we are doing hundreds and hundreds of calls, and our staff are there waiting to help and support you if you ever need. If you face a hardship of any kind in which you're struggling for the basics of life, or if you're a young carer struggling to get your homework done or to play or to do the things that it's important that you do so that you can carry on caring for either your sibling or a parent or whatever, you can contact us. And if we can't source help for you from elsewhere and it's a genuine emergency, then we'll be able to look to make a purchase on your behalf. If you go on our website, the criteria is there. Also what sort of things we can support people with. So feel free to contact us on that as well. And I'd just like to finish off by saying a big thank you to the staff and the volunteers at the Carers Trust who have bent over backwards over the last, is it 12 weeks now? I've lost any sense of time. What day is it? Is it Wednesday? Is it Sunday? It's just like a blur, isn't it? But I can remember when we decided to work from home, and we made a decision we were going to test it on the Thursday. And our team that do all this work did brilliantly. And by the Tuesday, I already decided, you know what, we're going to have to work from home. This is going so fast. And so we haven't really got back together since the 19th of March. And we've had some real challenges during that time. We've had bereavements, we've had real sadness in the team. And it's been hard. We've done our best to reach out to people. I'm sure other services have been in the same difficulty as well when loved ones have literally passed away. And I just wanted to mention our team and also the colleagues in the council and other services who are doing the very best. And there's loads of volunteers that step forward with shopping and with assistance. It was just neighbours have just gone that extra mile. This is all, I think, often under-recorded and under-emphasised, particularly in our national media. In our local media, it's a bit better, just of what effort's going on there. So I'd like to thank Julia, Tim and Denise and Pavel for coming on. And I tell you what, if we're still in this situation in perhaps a month's time, we may want to resume one of these and see if we can see what changes have happened and update people, because I think it may prove to be a very useful tool for people. Thank you again. And thanks for coming on and supporting the efforts for carers.